please excuse the lighting and the camera angle, but that's pretty much what we're working with right now. Whenever there is anything in life that produces a strong enough shift in the perception of our world, one always struggles to decide which string to pull to describe the experience to other people, or to distill the essence of what in that experience was in fact the transformative part that made the difference. You don't want to waste anyone's time, so at least I always try and find the omega point of what in fact occurred and what left the biggest imprint, so you can just say that and then not dance around the subject. I wanted to make a very short video about my 10-day silent Vipassana meditation retreat. When I came back about a couple weeks ago, as I tend to do, I shared my experience with a few friends, and many more people asked me to share that experience with them as well. I was actually very pleasantly surprised to discover how many people really wanted to hear my version of it, and that's encouraging. So thank you to anyone who wanted my attempt at this. So to whomever asked, I'm just making one blanket video that will allow me to share that experience with as many as possible. The main thing that really the main thing in the first couple of days, the first 3 days, that really hits you hard is how truly difficult it is to actually concentrate when you try. I mean, we all do it haphazardly, either because of work, or it just happens, we just happen to be in the right state of mind, or we work out and we have the right amount of endorphins in our blood so we can kind of concentrate better. Or if we have, if we have a child or any kind of big responsibility that just requires us to focus because we don't have a choice. And the rest of the time, we spend so much time of our day just being confused. And the funniest thing is that most of us don't even realize, including myself, how much of the day we actually spend being confused. Now, as opposed to what a lot of people think about meditation, the thing that I've been meditating on and off for years, and been reading a lot about it and watching a bunch of YouTube videos, just like any average person would, which has any interest in that kind of stuff. And the main misconception is that people think a meditation is about concentrating. But the truth of the matter is, concentration is just the tool that is used, at least in Vipassana that is, which is a specific practice of meditation, to then apply a certain technique of concentration to discover something very fundamental about our moment-to-moment experience as what we are as human beings. And that discovery holds within it a very simple yet very profound understanding about not just how to be in the world that is more conducive to a true state of happiness and well-being, but also it makes very clear and allows certain other smaller truths to come up on the surface that pertain to why is it that in fact we suffer so much on a regular basis without even realizing it. The technique basically revolves around applying attention to different parts of the body, basically scanning your body from head to toe. And by doing so, you discover that your attention actually is doing some major work in the allocation of of energy in your body. And I always try and stay as scientifically accurate as possible, or rationally accurate as possible. But there's just no better word to use in this case than energy. And by that, I don't mean some um, astral projection or some external energy from the universe. What I mean by that is that when you apply attention to, let's say, your hand, if you stay with your attention in your hand long enough, you'll start feeling that it's buzzing more and more. Now, you, we can then try and explain like what that feeling actually is. We can say, well, listen, this is the buzzing of the neurons, and when you apply your attention, then the neurons in the brain align, and they send the signals towards this part of the body, so you feel it more. However you feel it makes no difference to the fact that, as far as your first person experience is concerned, you are now shifting something in your perception of the world just by doing a mental maneuver that then puts the attention in your hand. When you do it long enough throughout your body, you start discovering that every mental structure you possess, every mental structure you ever went through, has a physical representation. Just like when you stress about something, your shoulders tense up, you got to go and get a massage. That's a physical representation of a mental structure of stress. And just like that, every single mental event that ever happens to you lunges itself somewhere in your body. Now, for the most part, in the Western world, we tend to ignore the physical part because we always focus on what we call ourselves, which is perceived by us usually being behind our eyes, between our ears, and we feel like everything else kind of belongs to us. Not realizing that the truth of the matter is, and this is true across the board, no matter what language game you want to play, we are in fact this one unit that functions as an entire system. It's not separate. So every single thing that happens to all of it. And what we tend to do is we tend to ignore the physical part and only pay attention to the mental part. And the second the mental part gets fixed, or to be more precise, we just put our attention to something else. We're going to go and watch a movie. We're just going to ignore whatever is bothering us in that moment. Then we feel like we solved the problem. But the truth of the matter is that the mental structure that, the physical effect of that mental structure didn't get to play itself out, so to speak. So it stays in the body. It stays as a function in our brain that then gets stored, and it gets pushed to the bottom. And the more time goes by, it gets pushed deeper and deeper by other experiences. It keeps overlaying themselves on top of it. And eventually, when you get to a certain point, when you sit down and just try and sit without doing anything, you discover that it's exceedingly difficult to do. And the reason for that is because all those little processes that launched themselves somewhere in your body as you were experiencing the mental structure, they come up on the surface because they still have energy that didn't play out all the way through. So they're still trying to play themselves out. They went into a loop and they're trying to express themselves. And in this case, expressing themselves fully would be the equivalent of you just paying attention to them the way they are without trying to do anything to them. So you're not trying to push it away. You're not trying to pull it if it's pleasant. You just observe it the way it is. And as simple as that sounds, that's actually an extremely hard task for someone who's not used to doing it. Because we always bouncing between wanting pleasant things and not wanting things that don't feel pleasant. And we constantly shift between those two positions, never really finding this sweet middle which we implicitly trying to get. And what you're learning how to do is basically to sit on this knife's edge between pushing and pulling and just being with whatever is in fact trying to express itself. So when you sit down and you start feeling all those itches and just like anybody who ever tried to meditate for 5 minutes discover, you immediately start having like those weird itches everywhere and little pains that just bug you, and you have to shift your position and just scratch it and move. And what you discover that those are not random things. Those are basically all those physical structures trying to express themselves. Now, something very interesting happens after the first 3 or 4 days where you observe all those itches without actually touching them, and you just sit there and you observe them for what they are, which is just an physical expression. You just feel it as a feeling. They don't come up anymore, or not as often. And that shows you that when they express themselves fully, they just go away because they fully express themselves. So unless you create more of them, in other words, unless you ignore more of the physical effects that trying to express themselves while you're experiencing the world, none of that will happen more and more. But the deeper things, which are usually heavier, so they sink to the bottom, and therefore they feel stronger. So if it's any pain, it's gonna show itself in a much more tangible way. Then those come up on the surface, and when that happens, then you really have to apply the technique and try and stay with it the way it is. But then the second you allow yourself to experience the heavier things for what they are without trying to push them away, something truly wondrous happens. And this was the moment for me, which I shared with a few of my friends, which I discovered that this is a real science of self-observation. The definition of a scientific endeavor is you have a hypothesis and then you test it by observation. Now, unfortunately, only one can observe whatever is in fact happening to you, but it is no less scientific in the sense that you are observing something that if you have a hypothesis about what's going to happen to that thing if you do that specific thing with your attention, and it always happens. And the following thing happened after I dealt with a few of the mediocre pains, and I think one of them was pretty intense. When I came out of that session, something truly wondrous happened. I felt clearer than I've ever felt before, or maybe when I was a kid. Colors were brighter. Everything was more crisp. The smell was much sharper. The sounds were much more clear, and it was tangible enough for me to say there's a real difference. It felt like somebody removed the veil. It's like you needed glasses, but you didn't know you needed glasses, and all of a sudden you just tried friends' glasses, and you're like, oh, wow, I guess I need glasses. Now, I'm the reason that stood out to me is because in that moment I realized a lot of that stuff is not happy talk. It's not metaphors. Those things that trying to express themselves, they make you run out of bandwidth. Your attention span is limited, and when other things that keep pulling it towards them, like those processes in the body that you're just not aware of because you never learn how to pay attention to them, your attention span to the world, including your senses, is limiting. It's limiting itself, and therefore you're experiencing it in a more muffled way. So the second you allow those things to express themselves, there's less of them, then you can view the world in a much clearer way. In any way. In a physical way, in mental, your mental structure becomes clearer, you think clearer, you become more creative. Those things are very, very tangible in that moment. So now I'm acutely being aware of the time. I don't want to drag too long. Might make another video about this, but know that there is something to this practice that you can experience on your own skin very quickly if you just commit to a few hours in the beginning, that you can see that it actually works. And then from there, you discover that the path is filled with those moments where everything just keeps becoming clearer and clearer and clearer, including your perception, including your senses, and everything else. And that is very clearly the path towards real well-being. Now, yeah, I don't want to drag it any longer than this, but I highly recommend it to anyone who wants to try something that actually works quickly and very tangibly. It makes a difference. So if you have a chance, do the 10-day silent meditation Vipassana retreat, sign up today, and then wait a few months, and they're going to return an email with an answer, and then you can just take it from there. So 2 thumbs up to that experience. And thank you for telling me that you want me to make more of those videos. It's very encouraging, and I'll try and do more of those very soon with a little more interesting content. So for now, have a good night, and always be well.